boost your immunity. So this is a really interesting study that was done looking at people getting flu vaccine and whether or not having broccoli sprouts that contain isothiocyanates, these are sulforaphane, same as in the adult broccoli, but more concentrated. If they had the flu vaccine and broccoli sprouts, what would happen? And so this is a study from University of North Carolina, in Switzerland, at Basel and Stanford. Took 29 healthy volunteers. Everybody got a flu vaccine. Half of them actually got 2 cups of broccoli sprout shake. All right, it's a shake that they had in the morning, and they measured it for 4 days. And guess what they found when they looked in their blood? The sprout eaters' natural killer cells, these are cells that actually pump up for immunity, had 22 times more potency, more activity. And the natural killer cells had more killing power against viruses. And when they did the swab, in this case, not for COVID, for the flu, they also had fewer virus particles in our nose because the body was armed. This isn't food versus medicine. This is food and medicine. Tool in a toolbox. That's what food as medicine research is contributing to. This is why doctors need to know about this and think about this and keep up with the research because it actually is helpful. Now, if you don't like actually broccoli sprouts or you can't find broccoli sprouts, a grown-up broccoli has the same thing. Let's say you don't like to eat the trees or the stem. Guess what? I tell people, go ahead and make a broccoli soup, a broccoli stem soup. I've made one with a little oregano powder, really amazing flavor. So the key is always to find a way to make foods that are good for you taste great. Now, I'm just going to close by talking about long COVID because I saw some people saying that they were interested in it. So at the very beginning of the pandemic, there were some folks that actually wound up being at risk for COVID because they were in Wuhan, China, for example, and they wanted to find out like who was going to go on to develop COVID and who wasn't going to get COVID, because not everybody got COVID. And what they did is they collected the poop from people in a big group that they looked at. Okay, 1,700 participants, and then they actually asked them what they ate, and then they measured their blood to see what kind of cytokines, virus-killing cytokines like interferon gamma. They wanted to find out who were the people that wound up getting COVID versus not getting COVID, and then they would have the blood to look at this virus-fighting cytokines. Then they look in the poop to see what kind of bacterial organisms, microbiome, the people who were vulnerable or the people who were resistant had. Then they had the food questionnaire, so they knew what they were eating. So let me tell you what was really amazing, because this is a complicated study and I don't want to show you the metagenomics. I just want to give you kind of like the top line. Guess what? They found that there were 2 bacteria that were in the poop in people that actually were resistant, and those people had more interferon gamma. That's a natural virus fighter that our own immune system produces. And they found that the people who had more interferon gamma also had more lactobacillus in their poop, natural healthy gut bacteria. And the people who had more lactobacillus were the people that were drinking tea, both green tea and black tea. What do they have? The tea has catechins, EGCG, okay? These tea catechins, they were drinking more green or black tea. They had more lactobacillus, they had more interferon gamma, and they had less COVID. This was at the very beginning of the pandemic. And I want to say July, we started to make these discoveries. So I'm not going to give you any like recommendations. I'm just sharing with you information that we've discovered that really is mind-blowingly important because, you know, in the middle of the pandemic, when everybody was locked in, we had no vaccines, we had no antivirals. The doctors didn't want to see you, and the hospitals had nothing to offer other than a ventilator, you know, and then throw in the kitchen sink. And we lost a lot of people that way. And everybody had to eat. And so one of the questions I asked all throughout the pandemic is, what should we be eating? What are the things that can help improve our immune system? Interferon gamma, a virus killer. Now, the other thing that was discovered is that there's another bacteria where people also had a lot of interferon gamma called Ruminococcus. Now, Ruminococcus is grown by dietary fiber. And so they looked at what were the people eating? Dietary fiber, plant-based foods, including nuts, tree nuts, walnuts, pecans, pistachios, macadamias. They all have dietary fiber. People who had more interferon gamma had more Ruminococcus. People who had the Ruminococcus were eating more dietary fiber or omega-3 fatty acids. So again, this is kind of the food as medicine research. Now I'm going to do a deep dive because these are association studies. Turns out once you dive deeper, and again, this is a parallel world. Like some people are developing vaccines, some people are developing antivirals like Paxlovid. Now other people are actually studying the impact of food. Turns out that kombu, which you find in Japanese food, which is made from seaweed, kelp, a kind of kelp that you find in your bowl of miso soup at the Japanese restaurant, that black square that's floating around that you can kind of down in one gulp. That is kombu. Inside there is a sulfated polysaccharide. It's kind of a Mother Nature's kind of sugar molecule that actually interferes with the binding of the coronavirus to human cells. Pretty amazing, right? So food is medicine research. And in fact, they studied this, and I don't have time to go through all the details, but kombu extract with the sulfated polysaccharides actually showed that they could interfere with the binding site of the coronavirus to human cells. And when you compare the graph, look at the graph on the left with the pink line and the blue lines, just look at the graph. I'm not going to explain all the details to you. It looks very similar to the graph of remdesivir, which is an FDA authorized antiviral that was used in the ICU at the beginning. So again, food is medicine. Can we use the same systems to study medicine, to study food? This is the future of what we're looking at in putting more tools in the toolbox of doctors, which includes foods, which is what patients are always asking about. Now, I worked on looking at what was going on with the circulation in COVID. And it turns out that with COVID, both acute COVID and long COVID, the virus, the coronavirus, damages your blood vessels, and you got to fix those blood vessels. So on the left is the lung of a normal person, and on the right is somebody who has had acute COVID. All right, they're in the hospital, and you can see the small blood vessels are disappearing. Okay, it really smokes. It reduces the number of small blood vessels in the body. Now let's take a look at long COVID, which is a strange condition of people weeks later, months later, sometimes for years later, still have difficulty and they can't breathe. They go to the doctor. The doctor says, there's nothing wrong with you. Let's get a chest CT scan. Looks normal. So I'm actually doing research now to take those normal chest CTs and do a artificial intelligence calculation so we can visualize the blood vessels. I want to show you this. Left is normal, right is acute COVID, middle is long COVID. Squint and you'll see that long COVID looks better than the ICU COVID, but it's not normal. So these people, if you have long COVID, you have an explanation. Your blood vessels may be damaged. And this is the kind of research that's going on. Now, why is that important? Because we can calculate, by the way, how much that middle individual, you can see that the small, middle, and large blood vessels, just look at the top. These are the tiniest one, the little red ones. Only 48% of normal blood vessels. Half of the blood vessels are gone, actually, in this patient. Chest CT scan looks normal. Got to grow them back. How do you do that? Can we use angiogenesis? Can we use stem cells? Can we use nitric oxide? Could we use food? One of the things that I'm researching now is actually using Viagra, sildenafil, that brings that nitric oxide to actually help to grow back more blood vessels and stimulate stem cells. So there's a lot of work going on in that kind of direction for long COVID. So in long COVID, you've got problems with blood vessels. You need to have better regeneration. And the immune system also seems to be acting up, overacting, causing autoimmunity and causing lots of inflammation. So in long COVID, we can take a look at the body's health defenses and say, is there a way that we can actually fix this? Using medicines, existing or to be invented, and very importantly, using foods.